Warning, the people who criticize cultural appropriation and those who defend cultural appropriation are almost always talking about two separate things. Welcome back, soldiers, to the Seriously Wrong podcast. I am Commander Sean, and this is my platoon sergeant, Aaron.
Reporting for duty, sir.
Now, this week we had a vote from our entire platoon on what topic we should cover, and unfortunately I have to report that we have a suicide mission ahead of us, soldiers. Today we're going to attempt to talk about cultural appropriation. It is going to be a deadly, deadly fight, and we're not all going to make it out alive, but hopefully we're able to move a little bit closer to that ever-present utopian future on the horizon, and hopefully we can all make you proud.
It's not an easy battle to plunge yourself into. There's a lot of bullets flying everywhere. There's hidden bombs under the ground, ready to be detonated, stepped on without knowing about it. We're probably not going to make it out alive, but those of you who donate to us asked for it, and so we are going to fight. We are going to march on.
We are servant soldiers in the Army for World Peace, and we will go directly into the front lines of the culture war. So sit back in your tank, relax, put on your seatbelt, and prepare for battle.
Seriously? Seriously?
Boys are stupid.
Seriously?
Wrong. Wrong. Wrong.
Seriously?
Are they wrong?
I think they're wrong 100%. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they're wrong.
Seriously?
They're always wrong.
That is absolute
Wrong.
Seriously?
It's so wrong. Wrong. Very nice words, but happens to be wrong.
Seriously?
Seriously?
Wrong.
Today's episode of Seriously Wrong is brought to you by Harmful Cultural Appropriation. Hi, I'm Mike, CEO of Harmful Cultural Appropriation. We at Harmful Cultural Appropriation take others' cultures, traditions, food, fashion, symbols, technology, language, and songs without their permission, and then use it for our own profit. We make sure to have no manners about it whatsoever, and even be a little disrespectful. We at Harmful Cultural Appropriation offer non-oppressed people the ability to play temporarily as an exotic other without experiencing any of the daily discriminations actually faced by those cultures. Everyone on our board of directors has dreadlocks, and we're working on a process to actually take uncopyrighted black music from the South and get white artists to perform it for big bucks. It's hard to pick what my favorite part of our organization is. On one hand, it might be the commodification and degradation of something that's sacred to someone else. But on the other hand, I do love fetishizing their culture without understanding it. Today's episode of Seriously Wrong is brought to you by Harmful Cultural Appropriation. Because profiting off of a culture that isn't yours in the context of economic domination, exploitation, unequal access to resources, and power structure isn't something that's worth reflecting about.
This episode of the Seriously Wrong podcast is brought to you by Beneficial Cultural Exchange. Hi, my name is Will Bennett, and I'm the CEO of Beneficial Cultural Exchange. The mission of our company is to spread great ideas around the world as far as they can go. We like to recognize that every culture is made up of shreds and tatters of other cultures. Consider that this audio recording is being made on equipment that came from all over the world. Consider that a book is printed by a process invented by a German on paper which was invented in China, and written in symbols that are a Roman Etruscan variant of a Greek form of the alphabet, which was in turn obtained by the Phoenicians, who originally got the idea from Egyptian hieroglyphics. American and Canadian culture of today is composed almost entirely of such imports and borrowings from every continent. Nevertheless, despite the borrowings, the cultures are still distinctly American or Canadian. The important point is not so much the borrowings as the particular ways the culture has combined the homegrown and the imported into a harmonious whole. Here at Beneficial Cultural Exchange, we believe that humanity shares a common heritage, that the great ideas being come up with all around the world all the time are the collective property of everyone on the planet for the benefit of everyone on the planet, and we seek to advance that agenda. Proud sponsor of Seriously Wrong.
I'm trying to think of when I first heard about the existence of cultural appropriation as a concept.
I think probably the first keystone touch point that came up for me was the white dreads debate, which probably isn't like the best introduction into the best version of cultural appropriation critique of like, why is this a problem? Like there's a better and worse version of even the white dreads argument. But I guess just briefly, the best version of the anti-cultural appropriation argument, I think, centers around sort of the like emotional experience of seeing aspects of your culture that you see as dear to you in some way being mocked or caricatured or presented in a way that divorces it from the context that makes it meaningful to you, and often presented in a commodified way or a way that sort of exploits those cultural elements for the profit of powerful people in the media or trying to sell a product. That's what I see as the best version of that argument. Like when I was researching about this, I can't remember if I think it was like a soda or a beer or something called Cherokee soda. And on the can of soda was like a headdress. And the person in this article I was reading was pointing out that Cherokee people, I can't remember, either didn't have headdresses or didn't have that specific kind of headdress. And Cherokee was also spelt wrong. And it was just like, okay, well, if you're a member of the Cherokee tribe and you go into a store and you're like, oh, look, it's Cherokee soda, but they spelled Cherokee wrong. And this image on the can has nothing to do with my culture at all. It's just being used to sell sugary bubble water. And, you know, this continent used to be all Native Americans until the British came here and killed most of them and destroyed their culture. So it's just like I can see why that bothers people. I don't think it's hard to see why that bothers people.
Yeah, and that example touches on like two of the kind of subsections of the critique that cultural appropriation is bringing forward when people talk about it, which is like one is taking something kind of sacred and bastardizing it or commodifying it. So like headdresses were sacred to indigenous groups and continue to be sacred to indigenous groups. And then having that used to sell sugar water is a little bit insulting, especially without kind of like the consultation or participation of people who that was sacred to on the land that used to be theirs that was taken from them.
Yeah.
But then also it fits into this other subsection that's sometimes grouped up with cultural appropriation that I would call like racist caricature, where the settler view on indigenous people merges Cherokee people and the indigenous groups where the headdresses were sacred to them or the specific headdress was sacred to them, and says like, oh, well, you're all native, so we'll use the word Cherokee, but we'll take this other thing from this Algonquin tribe or whatever.
Right.
And like, what's the difference anyways? Like, it's just the same to us.
Yeah, so there's that. And like, again, understandable. I think most people can get why that would upset people. And then like you go shoot way over to the other side of the discourse, like away from the meat of the objection and towards the meme version of the objection. And it's just like, white people shouldn't make sushi. Just like if a white person owns a sushi store, it's a problem.
Well, the meat versus meme distinction that you've drawn here, I think, is important because it's part of the way that the culture war is currently functioning. And I think it's part of the reason that cultural appropriation is such a hot topic that people want to hear us talk about. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think of it in terms of either echoes or compression, where there's like an original argument, this eloquent argument against the taking of cultural artifacts from genocided cultures by the genociding culture and then turned into commodity. Like that's the nuanced, detailed original argument, but then awareness of that argument goes further than the actual substance of the argument does. So people become familiarized with this like meme version of cultural appropriation that is any sort of cultural exchange or cultural diffusion or the inspiration from other cultures. All gets grouped up under cultural appropriation in this echo or like compressed version, because most people don't have room in their head to store the totality of all arguments. So they hear this compressed, shortened version of the cultural appropriation argument, and they object to the echo of the argument, having not heard the original argument. And also, I think a good portion of advocates for criticizing cultural appropriation are themselves participating in an echoed or compressed version. That someone who's saying, you can't do that, that's cultural appropriation, when the person responds, you know, in what way? Why is this meaningful? Like, how? I don't understand. Mm-hmm. then the person who's forwarding that argument, in some cases, they feel they understand and they're connected with the emotional narrative behind it, but they don't have the capacity as an individual to flesh out all the details and bring someone else into it. So then you have people arguing on behalf of an idea that they aren't fully fluent in. And so that's part of the reason these echo versions of ideas can spread so much further than the original idea.
Yeah, and then it just starts getting applied in a lot of places that maybe don't make so much sense. And the worst version of cultural appropriation argument is people should only participate in practices, should only write stories about, should only wear the clothing patterned after their heritage culture. We have to draw strict lines between all cultures, keep them in separate boxes, and everyone needs to like carry around a card with them that says which things they're allowed to do and which things they're not allowed to do. I'm slipping into reductio ad absurdum, which was kind of the point. But that idea becomes part of the conversation as well. And a lot of people just end up talking past each other, talking about different things when they think they're talking about the same thing. And the conversation's not quite meeting up in the middle in a way where they're touching each other. It becomes a mess. Hey everyone, if you want to hear the rest of this episode, it is up on our Patreon account. You can go to patreon.com, search for Seriously Wrong, or go to our website and click on the subscribe via PayPal button, and you'll find ways there to access the content either on Patreon or on our website. It's just $6 a month and you'll get access to regular subscriber-only episodes. If you can't afford $6 a month, we do need some help with certain tasks. If you have video editing skills or audio editing skills or anything like that, and you want to help us out with something, send us an email, use the contact form on our website, and we might be able to work something out for access to the bonus content other than by donating. Yeah, head over to Patreon, head over to our website, and you can access the content there. Thank you.